church was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. 2,000 people sat frozen in their seats. Not one person moved. Not one person breathed. Even the ceiling fans seemed to slow down, like the whole building was holding its breath. Pastor Raymond Dawkins stood at the pulpit in his finest Sunday suit, cream-colored, perfectly pressed, gold cufflinks catching the light. His sermon notes sat open in front of him, but he had stopped reading them. He had stopped doing everything. Because Denise Williams was walking down the center aisle of Greater Hope Fellowship, and she was not here to worship. She was wearing a simple white dress. No hat, no pearls, no carefully applied foundation to cover what was underneath. Her natural hair was pulled back. Her chin was lifted. And her eyes, those warm brown eyes that used to cry in secret, were dry and steady and dangerous in the way that only comes when a woman has nothing left to lose. The congregation turned one by one as she passed each row. Whispers moved through the crowd like a wave. "Is that Sister Denise? Lord have mercy, what happened to her lip? Why is she here? I thought she and Brother Marcus were separated." Marcus Williams sat in the very front row. He was dressed the way he always dressed on Sunday, tailored navy suit, fresh white shirt, gold tie pin. His Bible was open on his lap. He looked like the cover of a gospel magazine. He looked like everything a Christian man was supposed to be, until he saw his wife walking toward him. His smile did not disappear all at once. It faded slowly, the way light fades at the end of the day, gradually and then completely. Denise stopped in the middle of the aisle. She turned to face the congregation. She stood before 2,000 people and she opened her mouth. "This man you call a man of God," she said, her voice clear and steady as a river, "almost killed me last night." Church exploded. But here is the thing about that moment. It did not come from nowhere. That moment was built, brick by painful brick, over 4 years of silence, suffering, and a faith that was used as a weapon against the very woman it was supposed to protect. To understand how Denise Williams ended up standing in front of her entire church community with a split lip, and the courage of a woman who had finally decided that her life was worth more than her reputation, we need to go back to the beginning. We need to go back 4 years, to a church conference in Atlanta, Georgia. And we need to start with the man who looked exactly like everything Denise ever prayed for. Denise Carter was 25 years old when she met Marcus Williams, and she will be the first to tell you that the man she met that weekend was the most impressive human being she had ever laid eyes on. It was a Friday evening in October. The annual Southern Christian Fellowship Conference was being held at a hotel in downtown Atlanta. Denise had driven 4 hours from Birmingham, Alabama with her 2 girlfriends, Trina and LaShonda, packed into a silver Honda Civic that had no business making a 4-hour trip. But they made it work because that is what broke church girls on a budget do. Denise loved these conferences. She loved the worship, the teaching, the sense of community. She was the kind of woman who kept a prayer journal, who highlighted her Bible in 3 different colors, who genuinely believed that God had a specific person designed just for her, and that when the time was right, he would bring that person across her path. She just did not expect it to happen at the registration table. Marcus was standing in line behind her when she dropped her conference badge lanyard on the floor and it slid under the table. She crouched down to get it. When she stood back up, he was already holding it out to her. "I think this belongs to you," he said with a smile. Denise looked at him. Tall, easily 6'2", dark skin, clean fade, strong jaw, dressed sharp in a charcoal blazer and dark jeans. He smelled like cedar and something expensive, but it was not the looks that caught her. It was the eyes. They were warm, patient, like he had all the time in the world and she was worth every second of it. "Thank you," Denise said, taking the lanyard. "Marcus Williams," he said, extending his hand. "Denise Carter," she replied, shaking it. His grip was firm but gentle. He did not let go immediately. He held her hand 1 second longer than a handshake required, not in a creepy way, in a way that felt intentional, like a comma instead of a period, like a sentence that was not finished yet. Trina, standing beside Denise, cleared her throat loudly. Denise pulled her hand back. Marcus laughed, a low, easy laugh. "Nice to meet you both." "Enjoy the conference." He walked away. Trina immediately grabbed Denise's arm. "Girl," Trina whispered, eyes wide. "Who was that?" "I have no idea," Denise whispered back. "Well, you better find out," Trina said, "because that man is fine and he smells like money and Jesus. That is a dangerous combination." Denise laughed, but she did not stop thinking about him for the rest of the evening. By Saturday afternoon, they had talked for 3 hours straight. They found each other at the lunch break, Whether by coincidence or by the quiet maneuvering of two people who wanted to end up in the same place, neither of them would later be able to say for certain. Marcus was sitting alone at a table near the window with a plate of food and an open Bible. Denise walked past. He looked up. She slowed down. That was all it took. He was from Charlotte, North Carolina. He owned a logistics and freight company he had built from scratch in his late 20s after spending his early career working warehouse jobs to save capital. He was 30 years old. He had been raised in the church. He served as a lay leader at his home congregation. He had never been married. He believed in courtship over casual dating. He wanted children. He wanted a wife who loved God as much as he did. Everything he said sounded like an answered prayer. And Denise, being the kind of woman who led with her heart, who wanted to believe in the goodness of people, who had prayed for exactly this kind of man, absorbed every word like rain falling on dry ground. By Sunday evening, when the conference was over and everyone was loading up their cars to drive home, Marcus asked for her number. He asked calmly and respectfully, not with the pushiness that Denise had experienced from other men. He simply said, "I'd like to keep talking if that's all right with you." She gave it to him. He called her that same night before she even made it back to Birmingham. They talked until 1 a.m. She sat in the parking lot of a gas station while Trina and LaShonda slept in the car, and she talked to Marcus Williams about God and dreams and family and the kind of life she wanted to build. That was the beginning. And beginnings, as Denise would later learn, have a way of hiding what is coming. The courtship lasted 10 months. And those 10 months were, by every measure, beautiful. Marcus drove to Birmingham twice a month to see Denise. He took her to dinner, to church services, to quiet parks where they would walk and talk about everything. He never pressured her physically. He respected every boundary she set. He brought flowers, not just on occasions, but randomly on a Tuesday because, as he said, "You don't need a reason to remind someone they're special." He met Denise's grandmother, Miss Evelyn, a tiny 72-year-old woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue who had raised Denise after her parents passed away in a car accident when Denise was 9. Miss Evelyn looked Marcus up and down for a full 30 seconds before saying, "You have kind eyes, but I'm watching you." Marcus smiled at that. "Yes, ma'am, as you should." Miss Evelyn liked him. That mattered enormously to Denise. He asked Denise's grandmother for permission before he proposed, got down on one knee in Miss Evelyn's living room first before he did it officially. He told Miss Evelyn, "I want to spend my life honoring her. I just want to ask you first." Miss Evelyn cried. Denise cried when she heard about it later. Even Trina, who cried at absolutely nothing, had to take a moment. The proposal itself happened at their favorite park on a Saturday morning in August. Simple, quiet, personal. No flash mob, no camera crew, just Marcus, Denise, and a ring that caught the morning light. She said yes before he finished the sentence. Their wedding was the social event of the year at Greater Hope Fellowship Church in Charlotte, where Marcus was already a beloved and well-known member. 300 guests, white roses and gold everywhere. A 12-piece choir. Denise in a dress that took her breath away every time she looked in the mirror. Marcus at the altar in a white suit, watching her walk toward him with an expression that made every woman in the room reach for their tissues. Pastor Raymond Dawkins officiated the ceremony. He had known Marcus for 6 years and spoke of him like a son. He called Marcus one of the finest examples of a Christian man I have ever had the privilege of pastoring. Reception ran until midnight. There was food and dancing and laughter and joy. At the end of the night, Marcus stood up and made a toast. He looked at Denise the entire time he spoke. He talked about answered prayers and being a better man because of her. And then, as the crowd cheered and clinked glasses, Pastor Dawkins leaned over to his wife and said, "Now that is a God-ordained union right there." Couple did one more thing that night that sealed Marcus's status in that church forever. He announced a donation, $25,000 to the Greater Hope Fellowship Building Fund, as their wedding offering to God. Congregation erupted. People were on their feet. Pastor Dawkins looked like a man who had just seen a miracle. Marcus Williams was not just a great husband. He was not just a devoted church member. He was, in the eyes of Greater Hope Fellowship, practically a saint. And saints, as everyone knows, can do no wrong. The first 6 months of marriage were good. Not perfect, no marriage is, but genuinely good. They settled into a townhouse in Charlotte. Denise transferred her job to a marketing firm downtown. She joined the women's ministry at Greater Hope. She made friends. She built a life. Marcus was attentive, present, and loving. He prayed with her every morning. He cooked breakfast on weekends. He called her from work just to check in. He was the man from the conference, the man from the courtship, the man at the altar. And then came a Tuesday evening in March. It was a small thing. So small that later, when Denise tried to remember it, she almost could not believe that was where it started. She had gone to the grocery store after work. The line was long. She got stuck in traffic on the way home. She was 20 minutes later than she said she would be. She walked through the front door carrying 2 bags of groceries and an apology already forming on her lips. "Babe, I'm so sorry, the traffic was." Marcus was standing in the kitchen. He had his arms crossed. His face was different. It was a face she had not seen before, tight, closed, cold. "Where were you?" he said. "I told you I was at the grocery for an hour and a half. Marcus, there was traffic and the line was, who were you with?" Denise stopped. She set the bags on the counter slowly. "I was alone. I was at Kroger. You can check the receipt." "I don't want to see a receipt, Denise. I want you to look me in my face and tell me the truth." She stared at him. "I am telling you the truth." Something shifted in his eyes, something she could not name yet because she had never seen it before. He moved across the kitchen fast, faster than she expected, and grabbed her arm above the elbow. His grip was iron. "Lie to me in my house," he said. His voice was low and quiet, which was somehow worse than yelling. The pain was sharp and immediate. Denise gasped, and then just as quickly as it started, it was over. He let go. He stepped back. He ran his hand over his head. He looked at his own hand like it belonged to someone else. "Denise, he stopped. His voice cracked. "Baby, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I got scared when you weren't home. I thought something happened to you. I'm sorry." He pulled her into a hug. She stood still inside his arms, her own heart pounding against her ribs. He cried. He actually cried. He held her face in his hands and said, "That will never happen again, I promise you. That is not who I am." Denise looked at him, at the tears on his face, at the remorse in his eyes. At the man she had prayed for, the man her grandmother approved of, the man who proposed with his knee on the floor. She believed him. She did not tell anyone. Not Trina. Not Miss Evelyn. Not a single soul. She wore a long-sleeved shirt to church that Sunday, and she told herself it was a one-time thing, a moment of fear and stress from a man who was still learning how to be a husband. She had read enough Christian books about marriage to know that the first year was hard. Adjustment took time. She would pray about it. She would be more patient. She would make sure she was always home on time. She would do better. That was the first lie Denise told herself. And it was the one that cost her the most. If you are sitting there right now thinking about someone you know, a friend, a sister, a coworker, who might be in a situation like Denise's and smiling through it every Sunday, share this video with them. Sometimes people cannot ask for help out loud, but a story can say what they cannot. Share this right now. You might not know how much it matters. By the 8-month mark, Denise had told herself that lie 11 more times. Each time something happened, it was followed by tears and apologies and flowers and promises. The pattern was so consistent that Denise almost started to expect the flowers the way you expect rain after thunder. The incidents were not always physical. In fact, most of them were not, at least not at first. It was the words that came first. Sharp, precise, targeted words that Marcus deployed with surgical accuracy. Her cooking was embarrassing for a grown woman. Her work friends were a distraction. Her natural hair was unprofessional. Her laugh was too loud for a church wife. Each criticism came wrapped in a reasonable tone, delivered calmly, sometimes even gently, which made Denise question herself more than if he had shouted. Because who could be mad at a calm voice? Could complain about a man who spoke quietly? She started second-guessing everything. What she wore, what she said, who she talked to, how long she spent on the phone, whether she laughed at the right things, whether she was, in fact, the problem. Trina noticed the change before Denise said a word. They were at brunch on a Saturday, a rare morning out that Marcus had approved only after Denise gave him the restaurant name, Trina's arrival time, and a promise to be home by 1. She did not tell Trina any of that. She pretended she had nowhere to be, but Trina was Trina. She noticed everything. "You keep checking your phone," Trina said, not looking up from her menu. "I'm just Denise." Trina put the menu down and looked at her straight. "Talk to me." Denise opened her mouth, then closed it, then looked down at her orange juice. "Everything is fine," she said. Trina was quiet for a moment. Then she said very carefully, "The last time we had brunch, you laughed so hard at my story about LaShonda's cat that you spilled your coffee. Today you haven't laughed once. You've checked your phone 8 times, And you're wearing a long-sleeve shirt in 70-degree weather." Denise's throat tightened. "Trina, you don't have to tell me today," Trina said. Her voice was gentle now, but her eyes were not playing. "But I'm here. I'm always going to be here. And whenever you're ready, I'm not going anywhere." Denise nodded. She did not say anything else. But when she got home that afternoon, she sat in the car in the driveway for 10 minutes before going inside. And for the first time since March, she let herself cry, really cry, with no one to see it and no one to explain it away. The second physical incident happened on a Wednesday night in November. They had argued about money. Specifically about the fact that Marcus had moved Denise's name off their joint account and opened a separate account in only his name without telling her. She had found out when her card declined at the gas station. She came home and asked him about it. She was not yelling. She was not accusatory. She was careful because she had learned to be careful. "Marcus, my card declined today. Did something happen with the account?" He was at the kitchen table with his laptop. He did not look up. "I restructured our finances." She paused. "You took my name off the account." I said I restructured. "Marcus, that account had my direct deposit going into it. I need access to." "I'll give you what you need," he said flatly, still not looking up. Something shifted in Denise's chest. She had been quiet for months. She had swallowed words and bitten her tongue until it bled. But this was her money. This was her paycheck. "That is not how a marriage works," she said. "We are supposed to be partners." He closed his laptop. He stood up. And then he shoved her one hard, deliberate shove, and she stumbled backward into the kitchen wall. The back of her head hit the edge of the cabinet. The pain exploded white and bright behind her eyes. She slid down the wall and sat on the kitchen floor, stunned, holding the back of her head. Marcus stood over her for one long moment. Then he straightened his shirt, picked up his laptop, and walked upstairs. He did not say sorry that night. He did not bring flowers the next morning. He acted like nothing happened. He came downstairs, poured his coffee, kissed her on the cheek like it was a normal Thursday, and said, "Don't forget, we have dinner with the Dawkins on Friday." Denise sat at the kitchen table with a cold pack pressed to the back of her head and thought, "I have to tell someone." But she did not. Not yet, because she was still afraid, still ashamed, still clinging to the version of Marcus that everyone else saw, still believing, somewhere deep and irrational, that if she just found the right way to reach him, the man from the conference would come back. She kept that hope alive for 4 more months. It almost killed her by the following spring. Denise was a different woman on the inside, even though she worked very hard to look the same on the outside. She had lost weight she did not intend to lose. She startled easily. She avoided eye contact with women at church because she was afraid they would see something she was trying to hide. She prayed every single day, not for God to fix Marcus anymore, but for God to give her clarity. For some sign. For something. The sign came in the form of a Tuesday night that she would never forget. Marcus came home angry about something at work. He did not explain what. He sat at the dinner table and picked apart the meal she had spent an hour cooking. The seasoning was wrong, the chicken was dry. Who taught her to cook? She sat across from him and took it. Then he moved to her hair. Had she made an appointment to get it done? She was starting to look raggedy. Was she trying to embarrass him? She excused herself to go to the bathroom. She stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself for a long time. She looked at the hollows under her eyes, the tension in her jaw. The way she held her shoulders like she was always bracing for something. She did not recognize the woman in that mirror. She went back to the table and sat down. Marcus was still talking. And something in Denise, some quiet, stubborn, God-given thing, simply decided it was done being quiet. "Marcus," she said softly, "I need you to stop." He paused. He looked at her. "I'm your wife," she said. "Not your employee, not your child. I cooked this meal. I work a full-time job. I come to this church every Sunday and I smile at people and I tell them my marriage is fine. I am tired, and I need you to stop talking to me like I am nothing." Table went very still. Marcus set down his fork slowly. He looked at her for a moment with an expression she could not read. Then he said, "Who do you think you're talking to?" What happened next lasted less than a minute. But the pain lasted weeks. The next morning, Denise picked up her phone. Her hands were shaking. Her ribs ached with every breath. She had barely slept. Marcus had left for the office at 7 a.m. without a word, dressed in his usual sharp suit, Bible tucked under his arm. She scrolled to the church directory. She found the number for Pastor Raymond Dawkins' office. She stared at it for a long time. He was a man of God. He had known Marcus for years. He had married them. He had prayed over their union. If anyone could help, it was him. She pressed call. The phone rang twice. The church secretary answered. "Greater Hope Fellowship, how may I help you?" "This is Denise Williams," she said. Her voice was steadier than she expected. "I need to speak with Pastor Dawkins. It's urgent." There was a pause, then, "Let me see if he's available, Sister Williams." Hold music played. A soft gospel instrumental. Denise sat on the edge of her bed, her free hand pressed flat against her knee to stop it from shaking, and she waited. She had no idea, not even a flicker of suspicion, that the man about to pick up that phone would not save her. She had no idea that the call she was making to her pastor for help would send her situation from bad to something so much worse. "Sister Denise," Pastor Dawkins' warm, familiar baritone came through the line. "What can I do for you today?" Denise closed her eyes, and she began to speak. Pastor Raymond Dawkins had an office that looked exactly like what you would expect from a man who had spent 30 years building one of the largest black churches in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dark wood furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with theology texts and leadership manuals. A massive mahogany desk with a leather chair behind it that probably cost more than Denise's first car. On the wall behind him hung 3 framed photographs, one of him shaking hands with a former mayor, one of him at a national pastors' conference, and one of him breaking ground on the Greater Hope Fellowship Family Life Center, funded almost entirely by donations from members like Marcus Williams. Denise sat in one of the 2 chairs facing the desk. Her hands were folded in her lap. She had rehearsed what she was going to say at least 20 times on the drive over. She had prayed in the parking lot for 10 minutes before walking in. She had reminded herself over and over that this was the right thing to do. Pastor Dawkins was a man of God. He would help. He had to. The pastor leaned back in his leather chair and smiled warmly. He was a large man, broad shoulders, salt and pepper beard, deep voice that could fill a sanctuary without a microphone. He had the kind of presence that made you feel safe just being in the room with him. "Sister Denise," he said, "it's always good to see you. Now you said on the phone that something was urgent. What's going on?" Denise took a breath. Her heart was pounding so loud she was sure he could hear it. "Pastor Dawkins," she began, "I need to talk to you about my marriage." He nodded slowly. "I'm listening." She looked down at her hands. Then she looked back up. "Marcus has been hurting me." The words hung in the air like smoke. Pastor Dawkins did not move. His expression did not change. He simply watched her, waiting. Denise continued. "It started about a year ago, small things at first. He would grab my arm too hard. He would say things, cruel things about how I looked, how I cooked, how I talked. I thought it was stress. I thought he would change. I prayed about it. I fasted. I tried to be a better wife." She paused. Her voice was shaking now. "But it got worse. He shoved me into a wall last November. I hit my head on the cabinet. And last week..." She stopped. She pulled back the sleeve of her cardigan. There, wrapped around her forearm, was a bruise the color of a storm cloud, purple and black and angry. "Last week," she said quietly, "he did this." Pastor Dawkins looked at the bruise. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, folded his hands on his desk, and let out a slow breath. "Sister Denise," he said, "I appreciate you coming to me with this. I know it wasn't easy." Relief flooded through her chest. He understood. He was going to help. "Now," Pastor Dawkins continued, "I want you to know that I take these matters very seriously. Brother Marcus is someone I've known for many years. He's a devoted servant of this church. He's been a blessing to this ministry in more ways than I can count." Denise felt the relief begin to curdle into something else. "But," the pastor said, "I also know that marriage is hard. It's the hardest thing 2 people can do. And sometimes, in the heat of the moment, things happen that we don't intend, things we regret." He paused. "Now, I'm not saying what Marcus did was right. I'm not excusing it. But I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Denise nodded slowly, her stomach tightening. "What were you doing before these incidents happened?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Pastor Dawkins said, leaning back again, "were you provoking him in any way? Were you being disrespectful? Were you failing to submit to his leadership in the home? Because sometimes, And I've seen this many times in my years of counseling. Sometimes wives unknowingly push their husbands to a breaking point. And while that doesn't make what he did acceptable, it does mean that both parties have work to do. The room tilted. Denise heard the words, but her brain refused to process them. She had come here with a bruise on her arm. She had come here with a year of pain stuffed inside her chest. She had come here for help. And he was asking what she did to deserve it. "Pastor Dawkins," she said slowly, "I came home 20 minutes late from the grocery store. That's what happened the first time. I asked about a bank account. That's what happened the second time. I told him I was tired of being spoken to like I was nothing. That's what happened last week." She could feel her voice rising, but she could not stop it. "I have done nothing but try to be a good wife. I have prayed, I have fasted, I have submitted. I have stayed quiet when I wanted to scream, and you're asking me what I did wrong." Pastor Dawkins held up a hand. His voice remained calm, infuriatingly calm. "Sister Denise, I understand you're upset, but I need you to remember that God hates divorce. The enemy would love nothing more than to destroy your marriage and use you as a weapon against a man who has done so much for the kingdom. Now, I'm going to have a word with Brother Marcus, man to man. I'll remind him of his responsibilities as a husband. But I also need you to go home, pray, fast for 3 days, and ask God to reveal any areas where you might be falling short as a wife." He stood up. The meeting was over. "And Sister Denise," he added, "I would advise you not to involve outside people in this matter. These things have a way of getting twisted when they leave the church. Let's handle this internally as a family of faith." Denise sat frozen. She could not move. She could not speak. She felt like she was watching herself from somewhere far away, watching a woman who had just been handed a brick when she asked for bread. Pastor Dawkins walked around the desk and opened the office door. "I'll be praying for you both," he said with a warm smile. "God is going to work this out, you'll see." Denise stood up on legs that felt like water. She walked out of the office. She walked through the church lobby. She pushed open the glass doors and stepped into the parking lot. And then she sat in her car and screamed. She screamed until her throat was raw. She screamed until she had no air left. She screamed because she had finally asked for help and been told, in the gentlest possible voice, that her pain was her own fault. "I need to pause right here and talk to you directly, because what just happened in that office, that was not just a failure. That was a betrayal dressed up in a suit and a pastoral smile." Pastor Dawkins did not ask Denise if she was safe. He did not ask if she had somewhere to go. He did not offer her resources or contacts or protection. He heard the word abuse and immediately asked what she did to cause it. This is called victim blaming. And it happens in churches across this country every single day. It happens because some leaders care more about keeping families together on paper than keeping women alive. It happens because big donors get big grace. It happens because some people use scripture as a weapon instead of a shield. That evening, Marcus came home at his usual time, 6:30, like clockwork. He walked through the front door, set his briefcase down, and looked at Denise with an expression she had never seen before. It was not anger, it was not frustration, it was something quieter, colder, more dangerous. "So," he said, loosening his tie, "you spoke to the pastor." Denise's blood went cold. "Marcus, You went behind my back," he said, his voice perfectly level. "To a man I respect, a man I have supported, a man who looks up to me, and you tried to make me look like a monster." "I didn't try to make you look like anything," Denise said. Her voice was shaking. "I told him the truth." "The truth?" Marcus laughed, a short, bitter sound. "The truth is that I work 60 hours a week to give you everything you have. The truth is that I brought you into this church, into this community, into this life. The truth is that without me, you would still be in Birmingham working at that little marketing firm, living in a one-bedroom apartment, going nowhere." He stepped closer. "And this is how you repay me, by running your mouth to the pastor like some kind of victim." Denise backed up until her shoulders hit the wall. "I am a victim, Marcus," she said. The words came out before she could stop them. "You hurt me. You have been hurting me for over a year. That is not love. That is not marriage. That is abuse." The word hung between them. Marcus stared at her, his jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists at his sides. And then he smiled. It was the worst smile Denise had ever seen. It was the smile of a man who knew he had already won. "Pastor Dawkins called me this afternoon," Marcus said. "You know what he told me? He said you were emotional. He said you might be struggling with submission. He said he would pray for our marriage and that I should try to be more patient with you." He leaned in close. His breath was warm on her face. "He's on my side, Denise. The church is on my side. My family is on my side. Who do you have?" Denise said nothing, because in that moment she did not have an answer. Marcus straightened up. He adjusted his tie. He picked up his briefcase. "I'm going to my office," he said. "I have work to do. We'll talk more about this later." He walked upstairs without another word. Denise stood against the wall for a long time. She did not cry. She did not scream. She just stood there, staring at nothing, trying to figure out how her life had become a prison with no doors. The punishment came in stages. First, it was silence. Marcus did not speak to her for 2 full weeks. He walked past her like she was furniture. He slept in the guest room. He left for work without a word and came home without a greeting. The silence was so thick and so constant that Denise sometimes wondered if she had become invisible. Then came the isolation. He took her car keys. He said he was having the car serviced, but a week passed, then 2, and the keys never came back. He canceled her credit card and told her he would give her cash when she needed it. He told her she was no longer allowed to attend Bible study on Wednesday nights because she clearly had too much time on her hands and not enough sense in her head. Then came the monitoring. He checked her phone every night. He demanded to know who she texted, who she called, what she said. He installed an app that tracked her location for safety, he said with that same cold smile. He questioned her about every interaction, every conversation, every glance. Denise was trapped. She could not drive. She could not spend money. She could not talk to anyone without Marcus knowing. She could not go to Bible study. She could not call Trina without him standing in the doorway listening. She was a prisoner in her own home. And the church, the place that was supposed to be her sanctuary, had become part of the cage 3 weeks into the silent treatment. Something unexpected happened. Denise was sitting in the sanctuary after Sunday service, waiting for Marcus to finish shaking hands with the deacons. She was wearing a hat pulled low and sunglasses indoors, a ridiculous look that she hoped people would attribute to a migraine. She did not want anyone to see her eyes. She had not slept in days. A shadow fell across her pew. She looked up. It was Deacon Lloyd Harris. He was a quiet man, late 40s, tall and lean, with a neatly trimmed gray beard and kind eyes. He had been a deacon at Greater Hope for 15 years. He taught Sunday school for the youth ministry. He never said much, but when he did speak, people listened. "Sister Denise," he said softly. "May I sit?" She nodded. He sat down beside her. He did not look at her directly. He looked straight ahead at the empty pulpit. "Been watching," he said quietly. "I've been watching for a while now." Denise's heart began to pound. "See the way you flinch when Brother Marcus raises his hand to wave at someone. I see the way you check with him before you speak. I see the way you've stopped laughing, stopped smiling, stopped being the woman you used to be." He paused. "I don't know what's happening in your home, Sister Denise, and I'm not asking you to tell me, but I want you to know something." He turned and looked at her. His eyes were gentle, but there was steel behind them. "If you ever need help, real help, you can call me." No questions, no judgment, no lectures about submission or prayer or fasting, just help. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small card. On it was his name and phone number, nothing else. "Keep this somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere he won't find it." Denise took the card. Her hand was trembling. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Deacon Harris looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Because I watched my mother go through the same thing. And the church told her to pray about it too. She prayed for 23 years. And then she died, not from sickness, from exhaustion, from being broken down piece by piece until there was nothing left." He stood up. "God does not require you to be destroyed to prove your faith, Sister Denise. Remember that." He walked away. Denise sat in that pew for another 10 minutes, Deacon Harris's card pressed tight in her palm. It was the first time in months that anyone in that church had offered her help without asking what she did wrong first. It was a small thing, a business card with a phone number. But in that moment, It felt like a lifeline thrown into the middle of the ocean. She tucked the card into the lining of her Bible, a place Marcus would never think to look, and she waited for her husband to finish smiling for the crowd. Trina Carter had been Denise's best friend since the 3rd grade. They had grown up together in Birmingham, Alabama, 2 girls who sat next to each other on the church pew every Sunday, who passed notes during boring sermons, who dreamed about their futures while lying on the floor of each other's bedrooms eating Doritos and listening to Mary J. Blige. Trina knew Denise better than anyone. She knew what Denise looked like when she was truly happy. And she knew, with a certainty that grew sharper every day, that the woman she had seen at her wedding was gone. For weeks, Trina had been trying to reach Denise. Phone calls went unanswered or were cut short with Marcus's voice in the background. Texts were one-word responses. Video calls were always declined with excuses, "I'm tired," or "I have a headache," or "I'll call you back later." Later never came. So on a Saturday morning in April, Trina did what Trina always did when she was worried about someone she loved. She showed up. She drove 4 hours from Birmingham to Charlotte with nothing but her purse, her attitude, and her cousin Dante in the passenger seat. Dante was 6'4", 240 pounds, and worked as a bouncer at a club in downtown Birmingham. He did not ask questions when Trina called him at 7 in the morning and said, "I need you to come with me. Bring your presents." He knew exactly what she meant. They pulled up to the townhouse at 11:30. Trina walked up to the front door and rang the bell. She heard footsteps inside. The door opened. Marcus stood there in a casual polo shirt and khakis, looking like he had just stepped out of a catalog. His smile appeared immediately, the same charming, practiced smile that had fooled everyone for years. "Trina," he said. "What a surprise. Denise didn't mention you were coming." "Denise doesn't know I'm here," Trina said flatly. "I want to see her," Marcus's smile flickered. Glanced past Trina at Dante, who was standing on the sidewalk with his arms folded, looking like a man who was hopping someone would give him a reason. "She's resting," Marcus said smoothly. "She hasn't been feeling well. Maybe you could come back another." "I want to see her now." Smile disappeared. "Trina," Marcus said, his voice dropping, "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is my house. You don't get to show up here and—" "Marcus." The voice came from behind him, small, tired, but present. Denise appeared in the doorway. She looked thinner than Trina had ever seen her. Her eyes were hollow. Her skin was dull. She was wearing a long-sleeved shirt even though it was 75 degrees outside. And on her face, a bruise, fresh, purple, unmistakable. Trina's whole body went still, then she moved. She pushed past Marcus, actually shoved him aside, and grabbed Denise by the shoulders. "Denise," she said, her voice cracking. "Denise, what did he do to you?" Denise's eyes filled with tears, but she did not answer. She just stood there, frozen like a woman who had forgotten how to speak. Marcus stepped forward. "Trina, you need to leave right now before I call the police." "Call them," Trina shot back. "Call them right now. I want to see what they say when they look at her face." Marcus's jaw tightened. He looked at Dante, who had not moved from the sidewalk but was watching everything with cold, steady eyes. "This is a family matter," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "It's between me and my wife." "Wife," Trina laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You don't get to call her that after you put your hands on her. You don't get to stand here in your fancy clothes and your church smile and pretend like you're a husband. You're not a husband, you're a monster." Trina, Denise's voice was barely a whisper. But Trina was not finished. "I have known this woman since we were 8 years old. I watched her pray for you. I watched her defend you. I watched her disappear piece by piece over the last 2 years while everyone around her pretended everything was fine. And I am done watching." She turned to Denise. "Coming with me? Right now. We're going to my apartment. You're going to pack a bag and you're never stepping foot in this house again." Denise looked at Trina. Then she looked at Marcus. Then she looked at the floor. For a long moment, nobody moved. And then slowly, painfully, like a woman pulling herself out of quicksand, Denise nodded. They packed in 15 minutes. Trina stood in the bedroom doorway while Denise grabbed the essentials, clothes, documents, her Bible with Deacon Harris's card hidden inside. Marcus stayed downstairs, packing the living room like a caged animal, but he did not try to stop them. He knew better. Not because he had suddenly grown a conscience, but because Dante was standing at the bottom of the stairs with his arms folded, looking like a problem waiting to happen. When Denise came back down with her bag, Marcus was waiting by the front door. He looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. It was not anger. It was not sadness. It was something colder, something calculated. "You walk out that door," he said quietly, "and you're done. No church, no family, no one will believe you." Denise stopped. She looked at him, and for the first time in over 2 years, she said exactly what she was thinking. I would rather be alone and free than married and afraid. She walked out the door. Trina and Dante followed. They got in the car. The engine started. The car pulled away from the curb, and Denise, bruised, broken, terrified, and brave, watched the townhouse disappear in the rearview mirror. She did not cry until they were on the highway. And when she finally did, when the sobs came and her whole body shook and the tears fell faster than she could wipe them away, Trina reached over and grabbed her hand. Safe now, Trina said. I've got you. And we're going to figure this out together. Trina's apartment was small, a 2-bedroom in a modest building on the east side of Birmingham, but it felt like a castle. It felt like freedom. Denise slept for 14 hours straight. When she woke up, Trina was sitting at the foot of the bed with a cup of tea in one hand and a business card in the other. Drink this, Trina said, handing her the tea. And then we're going to talk. Denise sat up slowly. Her body ached. Her head was foggy, but for the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. What's the card? She asked. Trina handed it to her. It read, Vanessa Cole, attorney at law, family law, domestic violence advocacy. I called her this morning, Trina said. She specializes in cases like yours. She's helped women get out of situations just like this, women whose husbands had money, connections, church support, everything. And she's willing to meet with you tomorrow. Denise stared at the card. Trina, I can't afford a lawyer. Does pro bono work for domestic violence cases? No charge, I already asked. Denise looked at her best friend, the woman who had driven 4 hours on a hunch. The woman who had pushed past Marcus like he was a stranger on the street. The woman who had not asked a single question before saying, You're coming with me. Denise whispered. Why are you doing all of this for me? Trina set down her tea. She took Denise's hands in hers. Because you're my sister, she said. Not by blood, but by everything that matters. And sisters don't let sisters drown, not in bad marriages, not in bad churches, not in anything. You would do the same for me. You know you would. Denise nodded. She could not speak. The tears were coming again. Trina pulled her into a hug. No more praying for him to change, Trina said into her shoulder. No more pastors telling you to submit. It's time to fight, Denise. And this woman right here. She pulled back and tapped the business card. She's going to help you win. Attorney Vanessa Cole's office was not what Denise expected. There was no mahogany desk, no leather chair, no framed photographs with mayors and politicians. Her office was modest, a small suite on the 3rd floor of a professional building in downtown Birmingham. Clean, organized, and functional. A desk with 2 chairs across from it. A bookshelf filled with legal texts and binders. A single framed quote on the wall behind her chair that read, Justice delayed is justice denied. But it was Vanessa herself who surprised Denise the most. She was not what Denise had pictured when she heard the word attorney. Vanessa Cole was about 40, a medium-height woman with close-cropped natural hair, dark brown skin, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that were simultaneously warm and absolutely no-nonsense. She wore a navy blazer, simple gold earrings, and no wedding ring. She moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. When Denise walked in nervous, fidgeting, her eyes darting around like a woman who expected someone to come through the door behind her, Vanessa stood up, extended her hand, and said one thing. Safe here, 3 words. But Denise felt them in her chest like a key turning in a lock. They sat down. Vanessa poured her a glass of water without being asked. Then she folded her hands on her desk and said, Tell me everything. Start wherever you want. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. And Denise told her. Everything. She told her about the conference, about the courtship, about the wedding and the flowers and the prayers and the promises. She told her about the first grab, the first shove, the first time she hit the wall. She told her about the words, the cutting, grinding, soul-eroding words that came every day like clockwork. She told her about the money, the car keys, the phone monitoring, the isolation. She told her about Pastor Dawkins and his leather chair and his question, What were you doing before these incidents happened? She told her about Marcus's smile when he said nobody would believe her. She told her everything. And when she was done, she sat there, empty and exhausted and trembling, waiting for Vanessa to respond. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out a legal pad. Denise, she said, I need you to hear something, and I need you to really hear it. Not as a statement, not as a platitude, as a legal fact. She looked Denise dead in the eye. What happened to you is not your fault. What your pastor said to you was irresponsible and harmful. What your husband did to you is a crime. And you have every right, every legal, moral, and God-given right to protect yourself and your child. Denise blinked. Trina told me about Zoe, Vanessa said gently. Zoe, Denise's 2-year-old daughter, the one thing in her life that was purely good. The little girl with Marcus's jawline and Denise's eyes, who had spent the first 2 years of her life in a house filled with tension, silence, and fear. Zoe, who flinched at loud sounds. Zoe, who clung to Denise's leg whenever Marcus raised his voice. Zoe, who was currently safe with Miss Evelyn in Birmingham because Denise had sent her there 2 months ago. The one act of defiance Marcus had not been able to override because even he knew better than to argue with a 73-year-old grandmother who had raised a child from the age of 9 and was not about to watch that child be destroyed. She's safe, Denise whispered. She's with my grandmother. Good, Vanessa said. We're going to make sure she stays safe. Now let me tell you what we're going to do. Vanessa laid it out step by step. First, a restraining order. Immediate, based on documented abuse. Second, filing for divorce. Denise had grounds, clear, undeniable grounds. Third, a custody petition, full custody of Zoe. Given the history of violence in the home and the evidence they could compile, Vanessa was confident. Fourth, evidence. This was the big one. Vanessa needed documentation, medical records, photographs of injuries, text messages, anything that showed a pattern of behavior. Do you have anything? Vanessa asked. Denise was quiet. Then, slowly, she reached into her bag and pulled out a phone, not her regular phone. A small, prepaid phone, the one she had hidden in the bathroom cabinet months ago. The one Marcus did not know about. The one she had used to call Trina the night everything fell apart. She unlocked it and turned it toward Vanessa. On the screen were photographs. Dozens of them. Bruises on her arm, a mark on her shoulder, a swollen cheek, a cut above her eye. Each one dated. Each one time-stamped. Each one taken in secret in the bathroom with the door locked, while Marcus slept or sat downstairs watching television like nothing had happened. Vanessa looked at the photos. Her expression did not change, but her eyes, for just a moment, went dark with something that was not professional detachment. It was fury, controlled, measured fury, the kind that comes from a woman who has seen this before, the kind that comes from a woman who has lived this before. Denise, Vanessa said quietly, do you know how many women come into this office with nothing? No photos, no records, no proof, because they were too scared, too ashamed, or too beaten down to think about documentation. Denise shook her head. Almost all of them. But you, Vanessa tapped the phone. You did this while you were still in that house, while he was still controlling everything. You found a way to save evidence when every part of your life was being monitored. She leaned forward. You are stronger than you know. And with this, she held up the phone, we are going to win. The restraining order was filed the following Monday. Denise signed the papers with steady hands and a heart that hammered like a drum. It was official. Marcus was legally prohibited from contacting her, approaching her, or coming within 500 feet of her or Zoe. The divorce petition followed 3 days later. When Marcus was served at his office, a process server walking into Williams Freight and Logistics with a manila envelope while Marcus was in a meeting with his operations manager. The reaction was immediate. Marcus called Denise's phone 17 times that day. She did not answer. He sent 12 text messages, each one escalating in tone from calm reasoning to cold threats to barely contained rage. The first text read, Denise, we need to talk. This is a mistake. Come home. 7th text read, you think some lawyer is going to help you. I will bury you. I will take Zoe. I will make sure every person in that church knows you are a liar. 12th text read, you have no idea what you've started. Vanessa told Denise to save every single message. Do not respond. Do not engage. Let him talk. Every word he sends is evidence. Denise saved them all, but Marcus did not just fight with lawyers and text messages. He fought with the only weapon he had ever truly mastered, his reputation. He went to Greater Hope Fellowship the very next Sunday and stood before the congregation, not as a man who had been served divorce papers, but as a victim. He told Pastor Dawkins that Denise had abandoned the marriage. He said she had fallen under the influence of worldly people, by which he meant Trina. He said she was unstable and refusing to honor her vows. He said she had taken their daughter and was keeping a father from his child. He did not mention the bruises. He did not mention the shoves or the grabs or the nights Denise slept on the bathroom floor because she was too afraid to come out. He did not mention the bank accounts or the car keys or the phone monitoring. He told the story he wanted them to hear. And because Marcus Williams had spent years building his image, Years of donations and scripture readings and handshakes and smiles. They believed him. Pastor Dawkins stood up the following Sunday and made an announcement from the pulpit. I'm asking the congregation to keep Brother Marcus in your prayers during this difficult season. He is going through a challenging time in his marriage, and he needs our love and support. He did not mention Denise. He did not mention her side of the story. He did not mention the bruise she had shown him in his office. He mentioned Marcus, the donor, the leader, the man who kept the lights on at Greater Hope Fellowship, and he wrapped him in the church's protection like a blanket. The phone calls started the next day, women from the church, women Denise had sat beside at Bible study, women she had brought meals to when they were sick, women she had called friends started calling her. Not to check on her, not to ask if she was safe, but to tell her she was wrong. Sister Denise, you need to go home to that man, he is heartbroken. Girl, do you know how many women would love to have a husband like Marcus? And you just walked away. Marriage is hard, honey. You can't just give up because things get a little rough. A little rough. That phrase almost made Denise laugh, almost. But there was nothing funny about it. One woman, Sister Pamela, who led the women's prayer group, called and said something that Denise would never forget. Denise, I'm going to be honest with you. I think the enemy is using you to destroy a good man. Marcus has done so much for this church. He has given his time, his money, his heart, and for you to try to tear him down like this, that's not of God, sweetheart, that's the devil working through you. Denise hung up without responding. She set the phone on the kitchen counter in Trina's apartment and stared at it. Trina walked in, saw her face, and stopped. What happened? Trina asked. Denise told her about the calls, about Sister Pamela, about the devil. Trina's face went through about 4 different expressions in the span of 3 seconds. The last one was pure, undiluted rage. Give me that phone, Trina said. Trina, no. Give me the phone, Denise. You're not calling Sister Pamela. I'm not going to call her. I'm going to pray for her. Trina paused. After I curse her out. Everything, despite the pain, the exhaustion, the weight of a world that seemed determined to crush her, Denise laughed. It was a small laugh, a tired one, but it was real. And Trina, hearing it, seeing the first crack of light in her best friend's face in months, smiled. There she is, Trina said softly. There's my girl. Marcus's next move was the one Denise feared the most. He filed for custody of Zoe. His attorney, a high-powered family lawyer from Charlotte named Richard Calloway, the kind of man who wore $3,000 suits and billed $500 an hour, filed a petition claiming that Denise was an unfit mother. The filing stated that she had abandoned the marital home without cause, that she had relocated the minor child without the father's consent, and that she was emotionally unstable and unable to provide a safe and structured environment. When Vanessa showed Denise the filing, Denise's hands went cold. He's trying to take Zoe, Denise whispered. He's trying to scare you, Vanessa corrected. There's a difference. This filing is designed to make you panic and either give up or go back. It is a control tactic disguised as a legal strategy, but what if? Denise. Vanessa's voice was firm. He has no documented history of primary caregiving. He has no evidence that you are unfit. What he has is money and a good suit. What we have is photographs, medical records, text messages, and the truth. He's bringing a reputation into that courtroom. We are bringing receipts. She leaned forward. Trust me. Trust the process. And do not let him back in your head. That is what he's counting on. Meanwhile, something was happening at Greater Hope Fellowship that Marcus did not see coming. Deacon Lloyd Harris had been quiet. Too quiet. He had watched Marcus's performance on Sunday, the tearful testimony, the prayer requests, the victimhood, and he had said nothing. He had watched Pastor Dawkins rally the congregation around Marcus, and he had said nothing. He had watched women from the church call Denise to guilt her into returning, and he had said nothing. But Deacon Harris was not doing nothing. He was doing something no one expected. He was reviewing the church security footage. Greater Hope Fellowship had installed security cameras 2 years earlier, exterior cameras covering the parking lot, the entrances, and the walkways around the building. Deacon Harris oversaw the security system. He had access to the archived recordings, and he remembered something. 6 months ago, after a Sunday evening service, he had been walking to his car when he heard a sound, a sharp sound, like a gasp. He had turned and looked across the parking lot and seen Marcus and Denise standing beside their car. Marcus had his hand around Denise's wrist. He was pulling her toward the passenger door. She was resisting, not fighting, just pulling back slightly, the way a person does when they are in pain and trying not to make a scene. Deacon Harris had not intervened that night. He had told himself it was a disagreement. He had told himself it was not his place. He had gotten in his car and driven home and tried to forget about it, but he never forgot. Now, sitting in the church security office at 10 o'clock at night with the building empty around him, Deacon Harris pulled up the archived footage from that evening. He scrolled through the timeline. He found the moment, and there it was, clear as day, high resolution, time-stamped. Marcus Williams grabbing Denise Williams by the wrist in the church parking lot, pulling her stumbling, him pushing her toward the car, her flinching when he raised his hand near her face. 6 seconds of footage. 6 seconds that told a story Marcus had spent years hiding. Deacon Harris downloaded the footage onto a flash drive. He sat in the dark office for a long time, holding that small piece of plastic in his hand. Then he picked up his phone and called Denise. The flash drive arrived at Vanessa's office 2 days later. Vanessa watched the footage 3 times. Then she set the flash drive on her desk and looked at Denise. "This changes everything," she said. Denise asked. "Because this isn't just your word against his anymore. This is video evidence of physical aggression captured on the church's own security system in a public place. His attorney can argue that your photographs were staged. He can argue that your text messages are out of context, but he cannot argue with a timestamped security recording from a camera that his own church installed." She paused. "And there's something else. Deacon Harris told you that the church has had this security system for 2 years. That means this footage has been available to Pastor Dawkins this entire time. If the pastor oversaw security protocols, or if he was ever made aware of this incident and chose to ignore it, that makes him complicit." Denise sat very still. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Vanessa replied, "that your pastor may have had evidence of your husband's behavior and buried it to protect his biggest donor. The decision to go back to Greater Hope Fellowship was not made in anger. It was not made in revenge. It was made in the quiet hours of a Thursday night, while Zoe slept peacefully in the next room and Denise sat alone on Trina's living room floor with her Bible open in her lap. She had been reading Psalm 27. The first verse, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear?" She closed the Bible and stared at the wall. For 2 years she had been afraid. Afraid of Marcus. Afraid of the church. Afraid of judgment. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of being the woman who could not keep her marriage together. Afraid that maybe the pastor was right and she had done something to deserve it. But sitting there in the quiet with her daughter's soft breathing coming through the open door, Denise realized something. She was not afraid anymore. She was tired. She was hurt. She was scarred in places that no one could see. But the fear was gone. It had burned away slowly over the past few weeks, replaced by something harder, something brighter, something that felt less like rage and more like clarity. She picked up her phone and called Trina. "I need to go back to that church," she said. Trina was silent for a moment. "When?" "Sunday." "Why?" "Because 2,000 people think Marcus is a saint and I am the devil. Because those women called me and told me I was destroying a good man. Because Pastor Dawkins stood in that pulpit and asked people to pray for Marcus while I was sitting in your apartment with bruises on my body." She paused. "I tried to tell the truth in private. I went to his family. I went to the pastor. I did everything they told me to do. And they used my silence against me. So now I'm going to tell the truth in public, in front of everyone. In the same building where they chose his money over my life." Trina was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm coming with you." "I know you are." "Dante, bring Dante." Sunday morning, 10:45. Greater Hope Fellowship Church. The parking lot was full. It was always full on Sunday. Greater Hope was a megachurch, and Pastor Dawkins' sermons drew crowds from all over Charlotte and the surrounding counties. The choir was already warming up. The ushers were handing out programs. The smell of coffee drifted from the fellowship hall. Marcus Williams was in the front row. Navy suit, white shirt, gold tie pin, Bible open. He looked immaculate. He looked righteous. He looked like a man who had already won. Pastor Dawkins was at the pulpit 20 minutes into a sermon about the strength of the Christian family. His voice was booming, confident, rhythmic, the voice of a man who had been performing for 3 decades and never once questioned whether he was on the right side. "God designed the family to be a fortress," Pastor Dawkins declared, his hands gripping the sides of the pulpit. "A stronghold against the attacks of the enemy. And when the enemy tries to tear apart what God has joined together, we must stand firm. We must hold the line. We must." He stopped. Because the back doors of the sanctuary had opened. and Denise Williams was walking in, the congregation turned. Row by row, head by head, like dominoes falling in slow motion. Whispers spread through the sanctuary like brushfire. Is that Sister Denise? Lord, what is she doing here? Look at her face. Denise walked down the center aisle. She was wearing a simple white dress. No hat, no heavy makeup, no pearls, no armor except the truth. Her natural hair was pulled back. Her chin was lifted. And her split lip, the one from the last time Marcus put his hands on her, was visible. Uncovered. Deliberate, behind her, Trina walked 3 steps back. Solid, watchful, ready. Behind Trina, Dante stood at the back of the sanctuary near the doors, arms folded, eyes scanning the room like a man on duty. Denise reached the front of the sanctuary. She turned to face the congregation. 2,000 people stared at her. Marcus had not moved. His Bible was still open on his lap. But his face, that smooth, practiced, charming face, was frozen. The smile was gone. In its place was something raw, something exposed, something that looked very much like fear. Pastor Dawkins leaned into his microphone. Sister Denise, this is not the time or the place for. This is exactly the time, Denise said. Her voice was not loud. She did not yell. She did not scream. She spoke with the calm, steady clarity of a woman who had rehearsed this moment in her head 1,000 times and was finally saying the words out loud. For 2 years, she said, I sat in these pews, I sang in this choir, I served on committees, I tithed from my paycheck. I smiled at every single one of you and told you my marriage was blessed. She paused. It was a lie. Sanctuary was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming in the walls. This man, she pointed at Marcus, who sat rigid in his seat, this man that you call a pillar of this church, this man you ask to read scripture, this man whose donations paid for the carpet you are sitting on, this man has been hitting me. Gasps. A woman in the 3rd row covered her mouth. An older man in the back shook his head slowly. He grabbed me. He shoved me into walls. He kicked me. He controlled my money, my car, my phone, my friendships. He told me what to wear. He told me when to speak. He told me I was nothing without him. Her voice did not waver, not once. And when I went to your pastor, she looked directly at Pastor Dawkins. When I sat in his office and showed him the bruises on my arm and begged him for help, do you know what he said? 2,000 people held their breath. He asked me what I did wrong to provoke it. Sanctuary erupted. Murmurs. Whispers. A woman stood up in the middle section, her hand over her heart. A man in the back row said, Lord Jesus, loud enough for everyone to hear. Pastor Dawkins gripped the pulpit. His face had gone gray. Sister Denise, I understand you are upset, but this is not appropriate. Let us discuss this in private. I tried private, Denise said. Private got me blamed. Private got me told to fast and pray and submit harder. Private got me a husband who came home and told me the pastor was on his side and nobody would ever believe me. She looked out at the congregation. I am standing here today because I believed this church was my family. I believed that if I told the truth, someone would help me. And instead, I was told that I must have done something to deserve being hurt by the man who swore before God to love me. She pulled off her scarf. The bruises on her neck, faded now, yellow-green but still visible, were exposed for everyone to see. A woman in the front row started crying. This is what submission looks like in my house, Denise said quietly. This is what your man of God does when the doors are closed and nobody is watching. Marcus stood up. He did it slowly, deliberately, with the practiced calm of a man who had spent years controlling narratives. He buttoned his suit jacket. He turned to face the congregation with his hands clasped in front of him. Denise, he said, his voice smooth and measured. Baby, come on, you're upset. I understand that. But this, he gestured around the sanctuary, this is not the way to handle it. Let's go home. Let's talk. Let's work through this like what? Denise said. Like the last time we talked and I ended up on the bathroom floor. Marcus's jaw tightened. Making a scene, he said, lowering his voice. You're embarrassing yourself, Denise said. I'm embarrassing you, and that's what scares you, not losing me, not losing Zoe, losing this. She swept her hand across the sanctuary. Losing the image. The reputation, the standing ovations, and the brother Marcus, you're such a blessing, and the pastor shaking your hand every Sunday like you're some kind of hero. That's what you can't stand to lose. Marcus's mask cracked. Just for a moment, a flash of something dark and furious behind his eyes. He stepped toward her. Denise, I'm warning you. And that was when it happened. He reached for her. His hand shot out fast, instinctive, the muscle memory of a man who had been grabbing this woman for 2 years, and he lunged. In front of 2,000 people in the house of God on a Sunday morning, Dante moved like a wall of muscle and intention. He was between Marcus and Denise before Marcus's hand reached her shoulder. One hand on Marcus's chest. Not aggressive, not violent, just a wall. "Don't," Dante said. One word. Low, final. Marcus froze. He looked at Dante's hand on his chest. Then he looked around the sanctuary. 2,000 pairs of eyes staring at him. 2,000 people who had just watched him lunge at his wife in church. The mask did not just crack. It shattered. His face twisted. The rage he had hidden for years, the rage Denise had seen 100 times in their kitchen, their bedroom, their hallway, was now on full display for every single person who had ever called him a man of God. And in that silence, in that devastating, echoing silence, Deacon Lloyd Harris stood up. He stood slowly. The way a man stands when he has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has finally decided to set it down. "Have something to say?" Deacon Harris said. Pastor Dawkins pointed at him. "Deacon Harris, sit down. We will maintain order in this." "No," Deacon Harris said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "We have been maintaining order for too long while this woman suffered. If this church cannot handle the truth, then what are we even doing here?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a flash drive. "6 months ago," he said, "I witnessed Brother Marcus grab Sister Denise in the parking lot of this church after an evening service. I did nothing. I told myself it wasn't my place. I went home and I tried to forget about it." He held up the flash drive. "But our security cameras did not forget. This footage shows Marcus Williams physically grabbing his wife in our parking lot. It is time-stamped. It is clear. And it has been sitting in our security archive for 6 months, accessible to anyone with administrative clearance, including you, Pastor." He looked directly at Pastor Dawkins. "Did you know about this footage?" The sanctuary went deathly still. Pastor Dawkins opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He stammered. "I was not aware of every recording in the—" "That is not what I asked," Deacon Harris said. "I asked if you knew. I sent you an email 6 months ago flagging this incident and asking for a meeting. You never responded. I followed up twice. You never responded. And 2 months later, when Sister Denise sat in your office and told you her husband was abusing her, you told her to pray about it." Congregation erupted. People were standing up. People were talking over each other. Some women were crying. Some men were shouting. Sister Pamela, the same woman who had called Denise and told her the devil was using her, was sitting in her seat with her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Marcus tried to leave. He turned and walked toward the side exit. But 2 ushers, men who had shaken his hand every Sunday for years, stepped in front of the door and blocked his path. Not aggressively. Not violently. "They just stood there, Brother Marcus," one of them said quietly. "I think you should stay." Marcus looked at them. He looked at the congregation. He looked at Denise, standing in her white dress with her head held high and the truth written on her body and in her voice. And for the first time in 4 years, Marcus Williams had nothing to say. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Not because of the church confrontation, but because Marcus, in lunging at Denise in front of 2,000 witnesses, had violated the restraining order that had been filed against him. He was escorted out of Greater Hope Fellowship in handcuffs. The image of Marcus Williams, church pillar, scripture reader, generous donor, man of God, being walked out of his own church by 2 uniformed officers would be talked about in Charlotte for years. A church member had been live-streaming the service when Denise walked in. The footage captured everything: Denise's speech, Marcus's lunge, Dante stepping in, Deacon Harris's revelation about the security footage. By Monday morning, the video had been shared thousands of times. By Tuesday, local news outlets had picked up the story. Greater Hope Fellowship was no longer a sanctuary. It was a crime scene, and the man behind the pulpit was no longer a shepherd. It was a co-conspirator. The weeks that followed moved quickly. The divorce was finalized in family court. Vanessa presented the evidence: the photographs, the text messages, the medical records, and the parking lot footage. Marcus's attorney, Richard Calloway, tried to discredit Denise. He called her emotionally volatile. He called Trina a negative influence. He suggested that Denise had orchestrated a public spectacle to gain sympathy. Vanessa dismantled every argument, calmly, methodically. With the precision of a surgeon, when the judge reviewed the security footage, watching Marcus grab Denise in the church parking lot, he paused the video and looked at Marcus's attorney. "Counselor," the judge said, "is your client prepared to explain this?" Richard Calloway looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the table. There was nothing to explain. Denise was granted full custody of Zoe. Marcus was given supervised visitation only, and only after completing a court-mandated intervention program. The restraining order was extended. Denise walked out of that courtroom and stood on the steps of the courthouse. Trina was on her left. Vanessa was on her right. Miss Evelyn was sitting on a bench behind her, holding Zoe on her lap, feeding her Cheerios from a small plastic bag. Denise looked up at the sky. The sun was out. The air smelled like spring. She took a breath, a real breath, the kind that fills your lungs all the way to the bottom, and she let it out slowly. It was over, but the story did not end with the courtroom. Back at Greater Hope Fellowship, the fallout was seismic. The church board, a group of 12 deacons and elders, launched a formal review of Pastor Dawkins' handling of the situation. Deacon Harris presented his evidence: the ignored emails, the failure to act on the security footage, the counseling session where Denise was blamed for her own abuse, and the public prayer request that positioned Marcus as the victim. The board voted 9-3 to remove Pastor Dawkins from leadership. Pastor Dawkins issued a public apology, a carefully worded statement that used phrases like errors in judgment and failure to adequately address, and committed to learning and growth. It was the kind of apology that says all the right words without actually taking responsibility. Denise read the statement once. She set it down. She did not respond. Some apologies are too late to matter. Not because forgiveness is impossible, but because the damage has already been done, and words without action are just noise. Gloria Williams, Marcus's mother, called Denise 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Denise almost did not answer. She stared at the phone, watching Gloria's name flash on the screen, her thumb hovering between the green button and the red one. She looked at Trina, who was sitting on the couch reading a magazine. "It's Gloria," Denise said. Trina looked up. "You don't have to answer that." "I know," Denise answered. "Denise," Gloria said. Her voice was small, smaller than Denise had ever heard it. The commanding, image-conscious, always put together Gloria Williams sounded like a woman who had been broken open by something she could no longer deny. "I'm not calling to make excuses," Gloria said. "I'm not calling to ask you to forgive him. I'm calling because I owe you an apology." Denise said nothing. She waited. "I knew," Gloria said. "Not everything, but enough. I knew he had a temper. I knew it from when he was young. His father had the same temper, and her voice cracked. I told myself the same thing I told you. Endure it, pray about it, be a better wife, be quieter, be smaller, make yourself so small that he has nothing to hit." She was crying now. "I said those things to you because they were the same things I said to myself for 25 years. And I am so sorry, Denise. I am so sorry that I taught my son it was okay by never teaching him it wasn't." Denise closed her eyes. The tears came, but they were different this time. They were not tears of pain or anger or fear. They were the tears that come when you realize that hurt people really do hurt people, and that the cycle does not break itself. "Thank you for calling, Gloria," Denise said. She hung up. She sat on the edge of the bed. She cried quietly for a few minutes. Then she wiped her face, walked into the next room, and picked up Zoe. She held her daughter close and whispered into her tiny ear, "Nobody will ever tell you to make yourself small. I promise you that." 1 year later, Denise stood at the front of a community center in Birmingham, Alabama. The room was set up with chairs in a circle. 15 women sat in those chairs, women of different ages, backgrounds, and stories, but all connected by the same invisible thread. They had all survived. The support group was called Uncovered. Denise had started it 6 months earlier with Vanessa's help and Trina's energy. It was a space for women who had experienced abuse, particularly women in faith communities, where their pain had been minimized, spiritualized, or ignored. A space where no one would ask, "What did you do to provoke it?" A space where the first words spoken were always the same 3 words Vanessa had said to Denise in her office: "You're safe here." Denise looked around the circle. Some of the women were new, nervous, guarded, their eyes darting toward the door. Some had been coming for months and were starting to sit taller, speak louder, take up space. She smiled. "My name is Denise," she said, "and I'm going to tell you something that someone should have told me a long time ago." She looked at each woman in the circle. "What happened to you is not your fault. Your pain is not a punishment from God. Submission does not mean suffering, and you do not have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else's image warm." She paused. "You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to speak. You are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to heal. And you are allowed to start over as many times as you need to." Room was quiet. Then a woman in the corner, young, barely 22, with red-rimmed eyes and a sleeve pulled down over her wrist, raised her hand. She whispered, "How did you do it? How did you find the courage?" Denise thought about it. She thought about the bathroom floor, the hidden phone, the parking lot footage, the business card tucked inside a Bible, Trina's hand reaching for hers in the car, Vanessa's voice saying, "We are going to win." Deacon Harris standing up in that sanctuary and saying, "Let her speak." "I didn't find courage," Denise said. "Courage found me. It found me through the people who refused to look away, through the friend who showed up at my door when I couldn't ask for help, through the stranger who handed me a card and said no judgment, through the attorney who looked at my bruises and didn't ask what I did to deserve them." She smiled. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision that your life matters more than someone else's image. And once you make that decision, once you really, truly make it, nothing and no one can put you back in that cage. Young woman in the corner wiped her eyes. She nodded slowly. And then, for the first time since she had walked into the room, she sat up straight. Denise's apartment was small. A 2-bedroom on the south side of Birmingham with sunlight that came through the kitchen window every morning like a gift. There were drawings on the refrigerator, Zoe's artwork, bold and messy and wonderful. There were plants on the windowsill. There was a Bible on the nightstand, the same Bible with the same card from Deacon Harris still tucked inside the lining. Denise had a new church now. A small congregation on the west side led by a female pastor named Reverend Anita Crawford, a woman who preached that God designed marriage as a partnership, not a prison. A woman who said from the pulpit, "If someone is using the word to wound you, they are not speaking for God. They are speaking for themselves." Denise did not hate Marcus. She did not wish him harm. She prayed for him not for his comfort, but for his reckoning. For the moment when he would have to face himself without the suit, without the Bible, without the congregation to hide behind. She prayed that he would do the work, real work, not performance, to become the man he pretended to be. She did not hate Pastor Dawkins. She pitied him. She pitied a man who had spent 30 years building a kingdom on earth and forgot that the kingdom of God was supposed to be built on truth. She did not hate Gloria. She understood her. Because Gloria was Denise, just 30 years earlier, with no Trina, no Vanessa, no Deacon Harris, and no way out. The cycle had to stop somewhere. Denise decided it would stop with her on a Saturday morning. Denise sat on the floor of her living room with Zoe in her lap. They were reading a picture book about a little girl who was brave enough to roar like a lion even though she was small. Zoe pointed at the picture. "Mama, is the girl scared?" Zoe asked. Denise looked at the illustration, a tiny girl standing in front of a big, dark forest. "Yes, baby," Denise said. "She's scared." "She goes anyway." "Yes," Denise said, pulling her daughter close. "She goes anyway," Zoe smiled. "Like you, Mama," Denise's eyes filled. "Yeah, baby," she whispered. "Like me." The lessons. No scripture, no sermon, no tradition, and no title gives anyone the right to harm you. Submission was never meant to mean silence. Faith was never meant to be a cage. And if the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones holding the door shut while you scream, then sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is kick that door down and walk into the light. Your safety is sacred. Your voice matters, and you deserve to be loved without bruises. If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, please reach out. If this story moved you, and I know it did, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell me what part hit you the hardest. And subscribe to this channel because we tell stories here that change hearts and open eyes. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And thank you for caring. Until next time.